And now, Kerby Anderson.
Thank you for joining me. Hope you had a great weekend. It is Monday, and this is an opportunity for us to look forward to this week. Don't forget, there is a Democratic presidential debate tonight, so we'll be talking about that tomorrow. Thursday is the Republican presidential debate. We'll be talking about that on Friday. So we have lots of things to cover, as we always do here on Point of View, and this is no exception as we're dealing with some of this as well, because we're going to be spending a little bit of time, first of all, talking about how to raise our kids. Then a little bit later, we're going to be joined by an individual that's been on this program with us many times before, James O'Keefe, and you might remember him from some of the videos, undercover videos he's done on everything from Planned Parenthood to Acorn to voter fraud. His most recent ones we've mentioned, but we haven't had him in studio to talk about this or by phone, and so we'll be talking with him by phone to talk about the Common Core undercover videos. And I might just mention that also I know he's going to be coming out with a series on the VA, so we might talk to him about that as well. And then we'll get into the campaign, because after all, it is a Democratic presidential debate tonight. Lots of issues coming out of Iowa. The debate will be taking place there, and we'll talk about some of the concerns that are being raised about Hillary Clinton and the email scandal, which has developed into much more than it was just a few months ago. Also, some real big questions now being surfacing about whether or not the polling in Iowa is that accurate. And so we'll get into some of that. So there are lots of issues we'll talk about, but I thought it would be good, as we oftentimes do when we're waiting to talk about some of those political issues, which will certainly unfold tonight in the Democratic presidential debate, to focus on a couple of books that we think would be of interest to you. And one of those is a new book out called 8 Simple Tools for Raising Great Kids. And it deals with tools about talking and listening and influencing and connecting, teaching, encouraging, correcting, and leading. So we're going to spend a little bit of time talking about that. And it is written by Dr. Todd Carnell, and he is a licensed clinical psychologist who received his doctoral degree from Fuller Theological Seminary and completed postdoctoral work as well at the Children's Hospital in Columbus, Ohio. He works on some of these issues related to teenagers and ADHD and oppositional behavior, depression, anxiety, anger management. You may be familiar with some of his other books, like Respectful Kids, The Complete Guide to Bringing Out the Best in Your Child, Keeping the Siblings but Losing the Rivalry, The Parent Survival Guide. But this particular book by Dr. Cartmel is 8 Simple Tools for Raising Great Kids. We have information about it. You'll probably be able to find it in your local bookstore, published by Moody, but if not, we have a link to it on our website. Dr. Cartmel, thank you for joining us today here on Point of View.
Hey, Kerby, it's great to be with you. It's a real pleasure.
Well, and one of the people that endorsed your book, by the way, it's kind of a who's who of people that have endorsed your book. Many have been on our program, like Arlene Pellicane, but one is Kathy Cook. And she comes in here with some regularity because she's just down the road from us. And the last time we had her in was Screens and Teens.
Yeah,
and it
right.
does seem to me that it's always been tough to raise great kids, as you talk about. But I think there's a new challenge because of these digital devices. Don't you think so?
Yeah, I really do. I think parents are really, in many ways, we're trying to accomplish the same things that we always have. But yeah, we're just doing it in a different environment, one that's far more electronic in its terms of the allurements to the kids and the activities. I mean, when I meet a new kid, I'll often one of my initial interview questions I'll ask them what they like to do for fun, almost without exception, at least among the boys, video games is, one of the big ones. And
right.
For some kids, it's kind of about the only one they put on there, So, yeah, it's a totally different environment, and it brings its own challenges with it.
Well, over the next hour, I want to see if we can get into 8 of the tools and put those into the parental toolbox, and you've got some great resources. But the first one I alluded to is this whole idea of talking. You talk about control the volume knob, and I thought that was very good because you say your communication style with your kids is really, really important. Not their communication style, yours. And sometimes when, especially if you have an adolescent, they're yelling back at you or they're upset with you or they're curt with you, there's a tendency to respond in kind, but that's a real problem, isn't it?
Yeah, it sure is, Kerby. It gets kind of simple, I suppose, when you stop and think about it, but if I have 2 boys, and they're, what are they now, 21 and 23, so they're kind of, getting a little older, but, if I want I want them to talk respectfully, if I want us to have, be able to talk about things instead of shout about things, I mean, they're kids. I mean, I'm not expecting their communication style to, have, be flawless. It's a lot smarter for me to start with mine. And for goodness gracious, if I can't control mine, then I'm not sure, how I'm expecting them to control theirs. So, yeah, I think that's for a lot of things for us parents. That's just a good commonplace way to start in our thinking is, hey, how do I want to talk? How do I want to talk to my kids? I mean, I love the very simple, scripture verse, Luke 6:31. I don't often think of it as a parenting verse. I mean, I don't often hear it referred to as a parenting verse, but I sure think of it that way. Do unto others as you'd have them do unto you. So, I mean, if I'm the dad and I want to lead my family, that's where I start with my communication style, not theirs.
One of the chapters you have is about press pause, and you talk about the fact that a brief pause can make the difference between wise words and hurtful words. Well, we can mention all sorts of proverbs that talk about that, because it seems to me that we need to sometimes bite our tongue and not say maybe the first thing that comes to our mind.
Oh, boy, I hope your listeners are saying amen to that. And it's funny what, just something simple can have such a big difference. Our anger, anyone's anger and frustration, it can get a hold of you pretty quick. And if if we just learn just when we feel our frustration rising, when we hear our voice, starting to accelerate in volume, or our intensity starting to rise, just to pause, just to slow it down. I've noticed often, in my office, Kerby, that a conversation that goes bad, it goes bad fast. An angry conversation is quick. Everyone's talking, interrupting. When you just slow it down, and of course, the best thing you can slow down is yourself. And when you just slow the whole thing down, literally pause, you talk slower, you talk softer. When you just intentionally, as a parent, change the tone and the tenor and even the pace of the conversation, you will literally have a different. You'll turn an argument into a discussion.
One more tip I should say is just the idea of body language as well. Sometimes what is communicated is much more communicated by whether you make eye contact, how you say it. Sometimes is even more important than what you say.
Oh yes, well for sure. When we're talking with our kids, and of course we're talking about situations where there may be frustration, so that's often going to be maybe a correction type situation. That's a situation where our boy or girl has obviously done something wrong. They've made a bad choice in some way, and so the way I'd like to think about it is they need to learn a good lesson from that. I mean that's the whole point of me saying anything or doing anything is to help them learn a good lesson. So as a parent, what I want to be thinking in my brain is, how can I communicate with my words, with my body, with everything to open them up to the lesson that I want to convey to them instead of close them up?
Very good.
Body language is a big part of that.
Let's take a break. When we come back, we'll continue our conversation today. 8 simple tools for raising great kids. We'll have more right after these messages.
This is Viewpoints with Kerby Anderson.
Harvard Law professor Alan Dershowitz has been on talk shows recently expressing concern about the censorship that is taking place on college campuses. As I've mentioned in previous commentaries, it is helpful when someone who would disagree with you on everything from politics to theology at least agrees with your concerns about what is happening on universities these days. He was on Fox and Friends last week to comment on the growing intolerance of the left and began by reminding us of our history. He said that when he was teaching back in the 1950s, there were attempts to censor speech by Senator McCarthy. The right wing was trying to censor left-wing speech. Now it's the hard left that's trying to censor conservative speech, Christian speech, pro-Israel speech, you name it. Then he took on the latest campus fad about safe spaces. He said, we have to distinguish between safe spaces for ideas, there should be none, and physically safe spaces where you're not intimidated or you're not threatened. And Christian speakers, pro-Israel speakers, speakers that are not politically correct today, have their physical safety endangered. He then lamented that when he speaks on college campuses in favor of Israel, he needs armed guards to protect him from the radical leftist students who would use physical intimidation. They won't give me a safe space. They won't give pro-Israel students a safe space. They won't give Christian students a safe space. He also talked about a group of pro-life Christians who were attacked. They were told to be subject to training and sensitivity, and the president of Smith College had to apologize for using that term. Alan Dershowitz is right. I applaud him for speaking out about censorship and intolerance on campus. We need others to join him and speak out. I'm Kerby Anderson, and that's my point of view.
Take Kerby and the Point of View team with you on the go with the Point of View app. Search for Point of View Radio at the Apple or Google Play stores.
You're listening to Point of View, your listener-supported source for truth.
Continue our conversation today as we talk with Dr. Todd Cartmel. His book is entitled 8 Simple Tools for Raising Great Kids. It is published by Moody. Look for it in your local bookstore. 8 very important tools for your parental toolbox. And we've talked a little bit about tool number 1, talking. Dr. Cartmel, let's see if we can talk about one that's sometimes harder for parents. Number 2, listening. Listen first. It seems to me that, as you already have said in the previous chapter, sometimes when we initiate conversation, it shows that that's important. But after we initiate that conversation, sometimes we have to be willing to listen, even if sometimes we don't like everything we're hearing a young child say.
Yep, well said. It's I guess we just have to decide what we want. It's a little bit of planning for down the road. Do we want our kids to talk to us? I mean, they're going to talk to somebody. I like to think of kids like as if they were a dump truck, for example, and not that they're full of, rocks and dirt, but, in fact, what they're full of to, my boys, what they're full of to me, just like any of your moms and dads listening, I mean, my boys are full of their thoughts and their feelings and their opinions and what happened to them that day and everything else. I mean, those are like diamonds to me, and as they are to all of us parents. So we've got a dump truck full of diamonds, but the point in saying that they're a dump truck is that, a dump truck can hold a lot of stuff, but at some point, it gets filled up. And when a dump truck is filled, there's really only one thing that it can do, and there's only one thing for it to do. That, of course, is for it to unload. And listening is just letting our kids unload their truck, and because they're going to unload it somewhere. And I want one of my boys' favorite unloading spots, quite frankly, to be me. And if that's what I want, then I've got to be a good listener. I've got to be a listener so that when they're done talking to me, they walk away from that going, man, Dad really understood me. He really listened. Boy, I'm glad I talked to him, because then they're going to want to come back and talk to me again.
Yeah. And you even have one of your tips saying that when you listen to understand, your kids will want to unload their trucks in your zone on a regular basis.
Right.
Now, the problem with it is, Todd, is that they want to unload at a time when it's bedtime or 2 in the morning when they can't sleep, or when they come in from a date. It depends what age your kids are, but the bottom line. Yeah. Sometimes they want to unload the dump truck at a time when it is not convenient for you. Any thoughts?
Yeah, sure do. And there's a little bit of parental discretion on this one, because not every situation is the same. But I remember having a lot of really good talks with one of my guys, particularly. I had good talks with both of them, but one of them, in nighttime would be his time. And when we're talking to bedtime, that's when I don't know if you're just getting a little sleepy or something, but he would really tend to talk a lot, and not in a, hey, I'm trying to keep myself from going to bed kind of vein, because we can, sniff that out and postpone that conversation for later. But whenever it is, if I'm, hey, I can turn the TV show off, I can watch a football game later. If I have a chance to connect and really listen to something important that's going on with my kids, I'm gonna pick that. But then it has to do with how do you be a good listener? I mean, when they're talking to us, how do you do it? And Kerby, one of the very simple, I say simple, but not always easy tips that maybe even be a number one is to listen first and talk second. When there's something going on, I mean, we often as parents want to slip into teaching mode and explaining things mode, and that just kind of shuts them up. We're trying to again let them unload their truck, and I've seen so many times, just with myself, with my wife even, or with my boys, or in my office here with kids that I see. If there's something going on, I say, okay, tell me about it, and that's all I've said, and then they start unloading. And then when they're unloading their truck, I'm going to really listen with real sincerity to what's coming out of that truck. And I may say some words, but I'm not shoveling more stuff in their truck. I'm just trying to understand or ask a clarifying question. Hey, so sweetie, when Susie said that she said that at lunch, so that made you feel how? Just questions to try to really grasp what they're saying, so that when their truck is unloaded, I feel like, wow, I really understand what's going on. And then the thing is, if you do that, I mean, that boy or girl is really going to feel understood. And then, paradoxically, they're so much more open, because now their truck's empty, they're so much more open to what I would say, to the ideas or suggestions or thoughts that I would have to offer, because now, I've just done them in the right timing. I've listened first, now I'm talking second.
Well, again, that illustrates, I think, a very important point, and that is if you show that you care, then, of course, they will want to listen to what you say. And so that's a very important point. 8 simple tools for raising great kids. We've talked about 2, and frankly, if some of our listeners apply 1 and 2, we're in pretty good shape already, because those are very important. Let's move on, because you're sort of alluding to the 3rd tool, and that's influencing. Now, that comes from your words, mostly, some with your behavior, but you talk about the need to, first of all, remember who they are, understand really the power of your words, and see more than meets the eye. How do we kind of do some of that?
Well, I tell you, the Bible has a lot to say, about the power of words, and the words have the power of life and death. One of my favorite, fountain of life. I like to put that sometimes in the parent language and think, hey, the words of a righteous parent, can be a fountain of life to their kids. And I go, hey, that's what I want my words to be, And because our words, are just inherently, because we're the mom, we're the dad. Your words are so powerful to your kids, and it really behooves us to be very thoughtful about the words that we use. And because, when we remember, and one of the things I think is that God wants us to stop for a second and remember, as simple as it sounds, remember who our kids are, because they forget who they are. And I think He wants us to remind them who He says they are. And, our kids are, not just rambunctious and challenging and, bratty, here and there, but they are wonderful. They're God's handiwork. They're smart. They're pretty. They're handsome. They're creative. They're, at times very respectful. They're loyal. I could just keep on going. And that's who they are, and that's many times how they act, except that it's so easy for them to forget that. And when I use those types of words with my boys, when I say, hey, pal, hey, thanks for turning the TV off just now, buddy, that was really respectful. So I say a positive character trait. I verbalize it that he just displayed. And I do that on a regular basis. Pretty soon, he's hearing those words from me over and over and over again. And guess what? My words are starting to shape how he thinks about himself. He's starting to think, hey, I must be pretty responsible, pretty considerate, pretty friendly, pretty helpful. Why? Because Dad keeps telling me that. And you know what? I kind of like that. I kind of like how that works. And I'm shaping how he thinks Kerby shapes how he acts, and then that determines, kind of starts the the ball rolling with him developing habits, and that's going to shape the rest of his life.
You know, one disclaimer I'll say just before we take a break again is that some parents think that the kids don't really care what the parents say, or that especially when they get into those preteen and teen years, they just go, oh, whatever, you know, and they walk out of the room. And you kind of think, well, what use is it? But, you know, we've done some surveys, even the most recent one we did with the Barna Research Group of millennials, and found that still the most significant influence in the life of these young people are the parents, more so than, and I hate to say this to you youth leaders in church, but more so than them. Grandparents were at least in the running, but frankly, more than grandparents. And so even when they don't seem like they're listening, even when they seem like they're brushing off your comments, your encouragement, your correction, they're still listening. And so that's an important point. And just, again, part of some of the conversation we're having today with Dr. Todd Cartmel. The book is entitled 8 Simple Tools for Raising Great Kids. It is published by Moody, just an outstanding book and a handbook I would certainly want to put in the hands of any of you that have children or grandchildren. About 200 pages. And if you would like to know more about it, we have also a link to his website, and that will take you to drtoddpublishingpath.com. But again, you don't have to remember all that because it's right there on the website. That will tell you about a number of his books, some of his workshops. Perhaps you'd like to contact him. You have a specific question or like to have him come and speak. We have all of that at our website, pointofview.net. And we worked our way through 3 of the 8 simple tools for raising great kids. We'll try to get in the rest of those in the next half hour, and then we're going to move on to some other topics in the news because those are certainly relevant as well. As you go to our website, don't forget that I'm still encouraging you that some of you might want to join us on our tour of Israel and Greece. It's a 15-day tour. You can come either to Israel or to Greece, or many are opting to come to both. We're going to need that decision from you. Just a deposit is all we need right now, just to make sure that we can schedule enough airline tickets. And then, of course, the final payment is due later. So if this is something you've always wanted to do, please visit the website, pointofview.net. And as you go there, you might want to click on that donate button if you appreciate some of the conversation we have here. We certainly need your financial support, and we'll take a break and come back and continue our conversation with Dr. Todd Cartmel and his book, 8 Simple Tools for Raising Great Kids. We'll be right back.
I remember when I could take a family of 4 out for a simple dinner, and the bill came to around $10 for all of us. That was only about 15 years ago, believe it or not. Now, no way. But here and there, we still go out because it's kind of important to us as a family. Well, I believe that point of view is important, an important investment in all of our families. This is a unique and special time together each weekday. Kerby equips us to make a difference and keeps us aware of what's important to our families. Today, I urge you, many are watching from the sidelines. We need you in the game. Some give. If that's you, thank you. Many need to step up. Join the team, Truth Team 360. You can learn the details at pointofview.net. At the top of the page, click on Become a Monthly Partner. That's right next to the Donate Now button. Become a monthly partner. We need you on the team. Please join us. Pointofview.net. Or pick up the phone, call 800-347-5151. That's 800-347-5151. Point of View will continue after this.
You are listening to Point of View. The opinions expressed on Point of View do not necessarily reflect the views of the management or staff of this station. And now, here again is Kerby Anderson.
Privileged to have with us today Dr. Todd Cartmel, and his book is entitled 8 Simple Tools for Raising Great Kids. It's published by Moody. Look for it in your local bookstore, but we also have a link to his website on our website, pointofview.net. Talked about a few of the tools, talking, listening, and influencing. I thought we'd get to a couple more. Tool number 4 is connecting. Now, up until this point, Todd, we've been talking about primarily your words, maybe your actions, but the first thing you talk about is use your touch. And no doubt you're familiar with this idea of different love languages. And if indeed your child, boy or girl, is in some respects perceiving love through physical touch, a stoic parent is actually missing an opportunity to connect, right?
Yeah, well, before I forget, I was remembering, Kerby, that we put together a little, for any parent interested, we put together a little parenting kind of self-assessment quiz. It's really easy and fun to take, and it's at 8simpletools.com, and Moody and I put that together. And so any parent who wants to kind of get a sense of how they're doing and get a little, answer some kind of yes or no questions, and then get some feedback with regard to how they're doing with these 8 simple tools. It's a real, just a great little assessment, and I knew I was going to forget to mention it, so I wanted to throw that out there. But yeah, physical touches. I mean, I have met, every now and then, you might run into a boy or girl who's like literally has a little bit of a sensory, kind of sensitivity to touch. I mean, physically, and so you have to be a little bit careful there, and a parent would know how to do that. But outside of that, I mean, I haven't met a kid who doesn't, appreciate, just a warm squeeze on the shoulder, a little touch in the hand, a little squeeze on the knee, just little verbal, as Gary Chapman would say, little, not verbal but nonverbal affirmations. And the reason they're so powerful is because they're like a nonverbal "I love you." Everybody knows instinctively. You don't just walk around and the people on the sidewalk and go squeeze them on the shoulders or hold their hand or something and get arrested pretty quick doing that. Everybody knows you only do that to people that you love or people that you want to be close to. So when a mom or dad just kind of frequently every day just kind of peppers their day with lots of moments of just little warm physical touches, it just creates a warm, close, nurturing family environment. And how does that boy or girl not feel connected to? I mean, so it's a very, very powerful, simple but powerful tool.
And again, let me just mention 8simpletools.com/assessment. We'll have a link up there for you so you can assess yourself. But one other aspect of connecting is just the word time. It just seems to me that we are in this world where everything is fast-paced and frenetic, and it is difficult to actually avoid what you call the time trap. So another part of connecting is to make a concerted effort to have a time in which you get together. That can be a regular family time that you talk about, but it's some time in which you recognize that connection is really important. And if you just allow your schedule to determine when you get together, you're going to miss some really key opportunities, aren't you?
Well, yeah, absolutely. And when you say that, and in terms of time and even in terms of physical touch, the word that comes to mind that is central to both of those ideas is just intentional. You're being intentional with your touch. You're being intentional with your time. And being intentional, communicates, priority. It communicates value. If I'm intentionally, connecting with my kids through touch, I mean, they know that's not an accident. I'm not like tripping on them on their way to the fridge. I'm doing it purposefully. When I'm purposefully checking in with them, even, I work nights, sometimes, so, and different dads I know, they travel or different moms, and so everyone has a different schedule and different challenges with time, but with the time that you have, if I'm being intentional and checking in with my kids, and I'm turning off the TV and I'll play Legos with them or whatever it is, I mean, they can't escape the message that comes through, which is that, hey, you are my priority. I want to hang out with you. I want to be connected with you. And that's what builds a close, connected family.
So again, we've looked at about half of the simple tools for raising great kids. Let's pick out another one. Tool number 5 is teaching. And obviously, as we have said on this program so many times with different guests, oftentimes parenting and what you teach your kids is more caught than taught. One aspect that you talk about here is the idea of emphasizing respect. How so?
Yeah, well, the idea in that chapter is of a little simple guy we call the family respect rule. Pretty big deal, and I can just recite it for you. It's very simple. Family respect rule simply says everyone in our family needs to treat everyone else in our family respectfully all the time. And there's 3 fundamental lessons in that. Number 1, the family respect rule applies to who?
Everyone.
To everybody, yeah. And the kids know that. But then for me as a dad, everyone means everyone, but everyone starts with me. There should be nobody in my family, in my opinion, who works harder at following the family respect rule than me. Secondly, I'll just kind of go quick. The family respect rule applies when? Well, all the time. And all the time really means, it means we're meaning all the time. When we're happy, when we're sad, when we're joking, in the morning, in the evening, when we're tired, when there's a lot of homework, whatever it is. And the message there is we're saying that there's never a time when it's okay for anyone in our family to hurt someone else in our family with their words or actions. That's never okay. And that's not okay with me if my boys do it. It's not okay if I do it. Which leads us to the third thing. What's the basis for the family respect rule? And this is the part I like so much. If I was talking to a boy or girl right now, I'd say, hey, everyone in your family was made by who? Well, God. Everyone in your family is super-duper important to who? Well, to God, yes, and to us. And with things that are really important and valuable, well, what do you do with them? Do we just take them and leave them out in the grass overnight and, put them in the garbage can and throw them in the dirt? No. We take care of them. We protect them. We put them in a safe spot so they're not going to get kicked by accident or broken or anything. In other words, for things that are valuable, we treat them with a great deal of, and all the kids would say, respect. That's the whole point of the family respect rule. It's not just some rule we came up with. It's because my family, to me, is so valuable. I don't want them hurting each other. I don't want to hurt them. I want us to, I got one shot at a family. I want us to have the closest, kind of best family that we know how to put together. And we do that by treating each other like what we are, God's handiwork that precious and Christ died for, and we want to take care of ourselves and look after ourselves and treat each other with value and respect. And that's why it's not okay for us to be hurting each other with our words and actions. That's why we'll get a consequence when we do so, because we're hurting something that God said, hey, take care of that.
The other part of teaching that you have in the chapter there is problem solving. Such things as every problem has one or more good solutions, so sometimes they need to be flexible. Also, they need to learn how to solve some of those problems on the spot, don't they?
Absolutely. Well, there's so many. As a parent, we go into teaching mode a lot. There's lots and lots of lessons that our kids need to learn from us, and that's why a good communication style is so important. That's the bridge. If the bridge is broken, we're not going to get the lesson across the bridge. That's why the talking and listening is so important. But in terms of the lessons they need to learn, whether it's how to be flexible, which means think flexibly when something doesn't go your way, or solving a problem. My goodness, there's so many little problems that can come up, whether it's I'm stuck on some homework, or I don't feel like doing it, or my brother's turning off the TV while I'm watching it, or who knows, what they're coming into my room without asking. All of those. Well, for every one of those, there are all sorts of good ideas, good solutions. But the problem is our kids will often, first thing that pops into their head, unfortunately, is not always a good idea, and they'll kind of go with the first bad idea that pops into their head. So that just means, hey, they're problem-solving skills. They're not stopping to really, maybe they don't even know what that means, problem-solving skills. Well, that's something that we, in a really simple way, even in a family time or something, can sit down and walk them through some very simple problem-solving steps and practice it together, and here's how we stop, and here's how let's take some time and think of a couple good ideas for this practice problem, and let's think of some bad ideas, and let's see how each of them would work, and what would be a good plan that we'd pick to either prevent this problem or do on this spot. Now, no kid's going to do that on their own, but when we sit down as parents and in a real fun little way walk them through that kind of stuff and then do it a few times, in other words, practice that skill with them, then a funny thing happens, just like what happens at school or on the soccer team. When you practice something, you start to kind of remember how to do it, and you start to kind of get that little muscle or mental memory going, and pretty soon, guess what's popping into your head? Some good problem-solving steps.
Very good.
Not because they're on accident, but because the parents helped to plant them there.
We're going to take a break, and when we come back, we'll finish off our conversation today on 8 simple tools for raising great kids. Let me just mention, we have a couple of links there, but one we mentioned just a minute ago, 8simpletools.com/assessment. And you can get an assessment there, kind of figure out how you're doing, and you might want to pass that on to others as well. Perhaps you're a grandparent and you would like to give some instruction to your kids for your grandkids, so you could either take the assessment or pass it on to someone else. Let's take a break. We'll continue our conversation right after these important messages.
Now, back to Point of View, your listener-supported source for truth.
Got your card, Cartmel, with us for a few more minutes. If you'd like to join us, 1-800-351-1212. Going to probably take more of your phone calls in the second hour, especially when we have James O'Keefe. I know many of you want to ask him some questions about some of these undercover videos that have really exposed things like Planned Parenthood, Acorn. The most recent one is Common Core, but also he's looked at Organizing for America, Medicaid, NPR. He's got one coming out on the VA. Just incredible investigative work. So that is certainly available. 1-800-351-1212 if you want to join us this hour or next. But I thought we would work our way to at least one of the negatives, because up until now, Todd, we've been talking about talking and listening and influencing, correcting, teaching. We'd even talk about encouraging. Let's get to correcting, because sometimes we have to, in a sense, correct our children, and we have to provide that kind of correction. But even there, you've got some very helpful hints as part of this tool of correcting your children when that is necessary.
Yeah, there's all sorts of things we can do, to be effective correctors. One of the, I think, if I was to give you, Kerby, your parents one tip that would really apply to every correction situation they'll ever be in, it is to remember the purpose of a correction situation. And it is really almost like what we've spoken of already. It's teaching. It's helping our kids to learn the right lesson, the right way from this situation that will set them up. Set them up to make a better choice next time this same situation or a similar situation comes around. So it's really all about teaching, and so which gets us back to our style. In correction, we can have, there's two things that are always part of any correction situation. You have the content of the situation, or the content of your response, like are we going to send them to the room or to a timeout or whatever that's going to be. But then we have the style with which we do it, and it's the style where it's easiest for us to make a mistake, because we want our style, like I think I said at the top of the show, to be one that opens our kids up to the lesson we so want them to learn, instead of a style that closes them up. And so that's really the big deal. How can we keep our style to be a helpful and productive one? And the tip for doing that would simply be to be really aware of and intentional with how we are thinking as a parent, how we're thinking about what's going on. And I teach this to kids all the time, but this is like a parent version of it. In a correction situation, it's really easy to have for me as a dad, to have a head full of what I would just call mad thoughts. Oh, I can't believe this happening again. Oh, geez, doesn't this kid ever learn a lesson? Geez, this is wrecking my whole day. All those. And, we've all, had those. But those those little mad thoughts, those are little pesky devils. They don't help us at all. They teach the kids all the time, mad thoughts will make you have mad feelings, and they do. And so that spikes us, and then when we're kind of losing the battle in the thoughts and the feelings, then what goes south? What goes south is my talking style, my communicating style. Now I'm becoming a less effective teacher instead of a more effective teacher. So the antidote to that is something very simple but very powerful. We'll simply call them flexible thoughts. In this case, flexible thoughts for parents. And if I'm keeping my mind right on track, if I'm thinking, hey, my son has just made a bad choice here, how can I help him learn how to make a good choice? How can I help him, learn the right lesson the right way? Hey, I want him to follow my example, not me follow his. I pick 2 or 3 of those that I really like that help me stay focused on doing my job and doing it really well. And it's funny, when I train those 2 or 3 or 4 flexible thoughts into my brain, so that when I'm in a correction situation, that's what's kind of leading the way, then I'm not as frustrated, I'm more focused, and I'm focused on how can I be an effective teacher to my wonderful son or daughter right now. How can I help them learn the right thing out of this? And I'm in control of the situation instead of the situation being in control of me. And any mom or dad who does that will respond so much more effectively. And then, of course, that creates a positive spiral, because now our kids are learning the lesson better. And it's all because I kind of kept my thinking on track.
Very good. You mentioned the word example, and that's kind of the 8th tool of leading. You talk about the power of an example. Again, a lot of what parenting is more, what the kids get is more caught than taught, and leading by your example is the way in which to lead your children, both in faith, but also in just basic manners, practice, and all the rest, that as a part of raising your children up to be independent, educated citizens of our society.
Oh, and absolutely. In essence, I think, Kerby, you're exactly right. This is exactly what we've been talking about the whole time. In one of his books, I think a variety of years ago, John Maxwell, I always like this. He talked about several levels of leadership, if you will, and down on the bottom rung was what he called the positional leader, which is somebody who's a leader just because they have the title. They've been given the title for whatever reason, and so they just have, they have the authority. Like maybe you're a prison warden. Okay, well, you're in charge. Then you have at the top rung, you have what's called what Maxwell calls a personhood leader. And that's somebody who may or may not have the title, but just the way that they live their life, the way that they conduct themselves, makes people want to follow them. So, of course, as parents, we are already positional leaders. We have the title. We have the authority. You can put your kids in a timeout. You can take the television away. So we have we're all positional leaders, but the question is, are we going to be a personhood leader? Are we going to am I going to live with my boys in such a way that they want to hear what I have to say? They want to follow my example. They want to know God better because of the way I've lived with them. That's what a personhood leader is, and that's really what the whole book is about, is being, when you're really, really trying to be intentional with how you talk to your kids and how you listen and how you use your words to remind them of who God said they are, who God says they are, and to connect with them and to teach them in a helpful way, and to encourage them and to correct them in a way that helps them learn the right lessons in a way that they're open to. When I'm doing that on a regular basis, I think my kids are going to want to follow me. They're going to say, hey, I'm glad I got you as a dad. I'm glad I have you as a mom. And that's what happens when you do your best to be a personhood leader. And it certainly doesn't imply some kind of perfection. It just implies genuineness. And if I mess up, let me rephrase that. When I mess up, genuine personhood leader do? Well, I would go to my boys and say, hey, guys, the way I just handled that, I'm not real happy with how I did that, pal. I know I tell you not to shout, and there I was shouting. So I want to apologize. I want us to be able to talk about things, guys, without the way that I talk about things kind of getting in the way. And so that's something I want to work on, too. Man, when you get a few of those going around, your kids go, wow, okay, so that's what an apology looks like. But see, I wasn't teaching them a lesson. I was doing it.
Very good.
Leader.
Well, again, the book is entitled 8 Simple Tools for Raising Great Kids. It is published by Moody. We have a link if you can't find it in your local bookstore, but you probably will be able to find it there. We also have a couple of other links, drtodd.publishpath.com, so that you can contact him, find out more about his workshops, his books, and other resources. And, of course, we also mentioned earlier 8simpletools.com/assessment, where you could do an assessment of yourself or maybe of your children as they're raising your grandchildren. So we've got some great resources available to you. And Todd, thank you for joining us today here on Point of View.
Well, Kerby, thank you for the invitation. It's been a fun hour.
Well, it certainly has been very educational, and I hope we've been able to put a few tools into your parental toolbox, and that's why we wanted to cover this today here on Point of View. Let me just mention, in the second hour, we're going to get into some other topics, and the first one will be looking at some of these undercover videos. Some were done on Planned Parenthood, although since then the Center for Medical Progress has done a lot more. Of course, also James O'Keefe has been involved in showing the dark underbelly of Acorn and election fraud and what's happening at places like NPR and labor unions, but the most recent ones are on Common Core. So if you have a comment or question about Common Core, or perhaps you'd like to ask him a question, we'll open up those phones early, 1-800-351-1212. And as we take a break, visit the website, pointofview.net. You can find out a little bit more about our 15 days in Israel and Greece. We'd love to have you join us. We'll have more right after this.
Have you ever thought about taking a trip to the Holy Land? I know I have, but perhaps like me, you've always thought, there's no way I could ever afford it. And how would I get around, make sure I see everything? Well, maybe, just maybe, it's time to realize you can do it. Point of View has made the plans. 15 days, 10 in Israel, the possibility of 5 more on the journeys of Paul in Greece. And the cost, well, it's pretty surprising. You can check it out at pointofview.net. Click on the Journey to Jerusalem banner. Imagine yourself in Caesarea and Nazareth, where Jesus grew up, in Capernaum, on the Sea of Galilee. We don't suggest you get out and try walking, but, well, you could. The Dead Sea, Masada, the Temple Mount, the Garden Tomb, it's all included, and you'll be accompanied by Kerby Anderson. And I don't even have time to talk about Greece. Athens, Corinth, Berea, Thessalonica, Philippi. See the full schedule at pointofview.net. Come on, take that next step. Pointofview.net. Journey to Jerusalem. Pointofview.net. Point of View will continue after this.
I just thank God for y'all. I listen to you every day, truly. I wanted to thank y'all for everything you do each day to inform Christian families and our community about the things we can do, and just the way you're so informative. I listen to you daily and love you guys and appreciate you so much.
God bless you, Kerby, for keeping this show so on track and for the decades of wonderful help to this nation that Point of View has been. We're all big fans of your work, and we pray that God will just prosper it.
As a Christian, over the years that I've followed this program, I am constantly challenged to be on guard and to evaluate what's going on. And if for no other reason, to protect the caliber and the truth of your programming, I need to participate and to back your program financially to ensure that the truth stays out there for people to hear, to view, and to be a part of.
This is Point of View Radio.
Hi, this is Kerby Anderson. You know, each day we take on the tough issues and provide a biblical perspective to them. The topics we cover are wide-ranging: apologetics, theology, prophecy, creation and evolution, intelligent design, marriage, family, child-rearing, the millennial generation, trends in society, politics, economics, business, religious liberty, the Constitution, public policy, foreign policy, military policy, tensions in the Middle East, abortion, homosexuality, pornography, sexual ethics, media, technology, history, and America's godly heritage. We talk about anything that affects your faith, your family, or your freedom. So don't go anywhere, because Point of View continues right now.
Across America, live. This is Point of View. And now, Kerby Anderson.
Second hour today, and if you'd like to join our conversation, 1-800-351-1212. As we've been promoting, James O'Keefe joins us, and a little bit later we're going to be talking about the Democratic presidential debate. A lot of issues there. Certainly you have Michael Mukasey saying that a criminal charge is justified against Hillary Clinton. Some are saying that it's time to really take Bernie Sanders seriously, and we'll also talk about whether or not the polling there in Iowa is accurate, because I think they're oversampling individuals. But we'll talk about that a little bit later this hour. But we are privileged to have once again joining us James O'Keefe. Again, has been so involved in doing many of these undercover videos over the years. Founder and president of Project Veritas. You can think of the videos, for example, that really show some of the dark underbelly of Acorn and Planned Parenthood. This one, of course, dealing with public education, but we've learned a lot about even election fraud and Medicaid and NPR. I know he's got some coming out a little bit later on the VA. These ones on Common Core are very significant. And James O'Keefe is a graduate of Rutgers University. A while back, he actually received a congressional resolution praising him. Also has been the recipient of the Robert Novak Award for Journalistic Excellence. And on at least two occasions I know of, Fox News has listed him as Power Player of the Week. James, welcome back to Point of View.
Thank you so much for having me.
You know, we've talked about Common Core many times with educators on this program. Some have been in studio, some by phone. But as a matter of fact, the other day, I had actually scheduled a person to be in there, and that's when your video landed. And so we had a lot more to talk about. But in case people are not familiar, of course, you had one that landed on Tuesday, January 12th. And that's the one where they said, I hate kids. And then immediately some of the executives were terminated. Then you had another one land. And then, of course, all the way now you've had one landing in January 21st. So we have now seen a number of those dropping, and they have actually had a very profound impact. But give us the backstory. How did you come upon the idea of talking to some of the publishers of Common Core?
Well, you know, it was an interesting concept. We were confronted by this topic over the last few years. Our audience has been just incredibly angry about this subject, and they want us to do something about it. Common Core is not like other entities. It's not an entity. It's the federal government requiring. It's an initiative that the federal government requires states to adopt and requires states to have this curriculum. And many people don't even know what Common Core is, to be honest, so I have to explain it. And it's an initiative. So we did our undercover expertise. We posed as lobbyists. We posed as representatives for corporations like these publishers, and we met with many different officials, top executives at Houghton Mifflin, McGraw-Hill, Pearson. These are billion-dollar companies that get money from the federal government to sell books. And what we found was nothing short of shocking. The first video, when we went undercover, and this took us months to do. We had to build relationships with these people so they trusted us. Diane Barrow was her name. She was an executive at Houghton Mifflin, and she says, I hate kids. It's all about the money, and that we're not even in it to do anything but sell books.
Yeah.
The second official, Batiste was her name. She worked for Houghton Mifflin as well. She says, quote, it's never about the kids. And she says, it's all a scheme, a racket, to slap stuff on the front of the book so you sell more of it. And now the third, and we have some breaking news, and I'll tell you that in a moment.
Okay.
The third official, Kim Korber is her name. She was with Pearson. Now she was with National Geographic Education, another Common Core group. And she says that, and she talks about teaching chlamydia to children, teaching about prostitution, that the founding fathers nothing more than, quote, dead white guys, unquote. She talks about changing math. This official has just lost her job. We just found out that out today.
Wow. So here another one drops.
So
okay. Yeah.
3 executives have been fired in the course of a week, and there's more to come.
And I must admit that when I first heard that you had a Common Core video, the first thing went into Acorn or went to like the Department of Education or something. And what would be so controversial? Because after all, these would probably be true believers. So all they're going to do is say, well, I just think this is really good for the kids. And then you watch the video with Diane Barrow, and she says, oh, really? I hate kids. I'm into selling books. I don't kid yourself. And I thought, oh goodness, these are going to drop like nothing before, because I honestly thought, James, before this happened, that you'd have people that would say this was really good. This was the latest educational fad, and it's going to be good for the kids. But then when you had a chance to interview some of the people in publishing, you said, no, we just changed the name. Maybe if we can change the name, we'll actually sell more books. They were into it for the money and did not give a whit about the kids. That was shocking to me.
Yeah, nothing shocks me anymore, and I'm glad it's shocking to you, because our goal is to shock the consciences of America, is to get people to understand what's at stake. And sometimes the only way to do that is through video. But what we found is that this whole scheme, I don't know what else to call it except a scheme, is nothing more than about the money. I mean, I understand ideology is important, and people in the government, certain people are ideologically motivated, but the bottom line is these big four educational publishing companies spend tens of millions of dollars hiring government officials, paying them so that they can change the laws so that they can sell more books. That's all it is. And I know that seems kind of obvious, but when I don't know how else to put it. When Diane Barrow is saying, I hate kids, it's all about the money. There is no statement I could have possibly got on hidden camera that is more poignant than that.
Yes.
And I do believe that the majority of the people we spoke with are publishers so far, so we haven't obviously gone to the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. We haven't gone to David Coleman yet in the federal government, but most of these people are crony capitalists who seek to earn a profit, with the exception of Kim Korver at National Geographic, who goes on this rampage for 45 minutes in our meeting about how much he hates Fox News and how much he wants to transform the history AP testing.
Yeah, and that was helpful, because I sometimes explain to people, because I've spoken on college campuses over the years, about what some of the professors hold to. But that particular piece from Kim Korver at National Geographic, which I guess we'll announce, as you just did a minute ago, has now lost her job, is the typical kind of rant that you get so often. So let's take a break, and when we come back, I want to take some phone calls, because some of you would like to address this issue, and we also want to educate you about what is available at Project Veritas, because there are a lot of resources there, and of course we've mentioned the videos that you can watch. I'll give you a disclaimer. They use some words that we would never use on the air, and you probably don't use either. So there's a couple bad words in it, so be aware of that. But then also you can find out a little bit more about ProjectVeritas.com, because they have exposed so many other things as well, doing the kind of investigative journalism that many of us hope that 60 Minutes or 2020 or those would do. But instead, this vacuum has been filled by James O'Keefe and others. We've talked about Lila Rose and the Center for Medical Progress and some of the others to really help us understand what is taking place. So we'll come back. We'll take some of your phone calls. Perhaps you have comments about Common Core, have comments about these videos, which are pretty shocking and are intended to be so. And if you'd like to join us, 1-800-351-1212. If you'd like to know more about Project Veritas or James O'Keefe, we have that link on our website, pointofview.net. We'll be back right after this.
This is Viewpoints with Kerby Anderson.
Harvard Law professor Alan Dershowitz has been on talk shows recently expressing concern about the censorship that is taking place on college campuses. As I've mentioned in previous commentaries, it is helpful when someone who would disagree with you on everything from politics to theology at least agrees with your concerns about what is happening on universities these days. He was on Fox and Friends last week to comment on the growing intolerance of the left and began by reminding us of our history. He said that when he was teaching back in the 1950s, there were attempts to censor speech by Senator McCarthy. The right wing was trying to censor left-wing speech. Now it's the hard left that's trying to censor conservative speech, Christian speech, pro-Israel speech, you name it. Then he took on the latest campus fad about safe spaces. He said, we have to distinguish between safe spaces for ideas, there should be none, and physically safe spaces where you're not intimidated or you're not threatened. And Christian speakers, pro-Israel speakers, speakers that are not politically correct today, have their physical safety endangered. He then lamented that when he speaks on college campuses in favor of Israel, he needs armed guards to protect him from the radical leftist students who would use physical intimidation. They won't give me a safe space. They won't give pro-Israel students a safe space. They won't give Christian students a safe space. He also talked about a group of pro-life Christians who were attacked. They were told to be subject to training and sensitivity, and the president of Smith College had to apologize for using that term. Alan Dershowitz is right. I applaud him for speaking out about censorship and intolerance on campus. We need others to join him and speak out. I'm Kerby Anderson, and that's my point of view.
Take Kerby and the Point of View team with you on the go with the Point of View app. Search for Point of View Radio at the Apple or Google Play stores.
You're listening to Point of View, your listener-supported source for truth.
James O'Keefe with us for just a few more minutes, and again, talking about Common Core and some of those publishing companies and a number of videos that have dropped. Also, 3 executives now have been terminated because of those videos, and perhaps more to come. So if you'd like to join us, 1-800-351-1212. Let's take a phone call. We'll go to WGPH in Georgia. Ken, thank you for joining us today here on Point of View. Well, do we have Ken there? Ken, are you there? Well, I'll put Ken on hold there. We'll see if we get Ken in just a minute. And in the process, let's, if we can, maybe, James, talk about what is next, because are there other videos that may drop soon, or is this the sum total of the work you've done on Common Core?
There's always another video to drop. It's never the end. We don't fire all our ammunition at once here. We learned that from a master long ago. The next story is actually probably the biggest, in my opinion and estimation. There was a scandal involving, we talked about crony capitalism with Common Core, where these so-called for-profit educational companies get rich off the federal government requiring states to adopt these standards. Well, what we have is proof of not only cronyism, but corruption. We have multiple officials admitting to rigging deals and potential bid rigging in some of those deals. It really is all about the money, but we got them on tape saying it, and these are executives in the industry. So it'll be really fascinating to watch the reaction. Just to remind your audience, we have released 3 videos thus far over the last 10 days. Someone has been fired after each video, and it is an extraordinary series of events that 3 executives have all lost their jobs, and the mainstream media has not reported one word about the story. The Washington Post picked it up, but Fox News, MSNBC, and CNN will not talk about these videos. probably because it's Common Core and people think conspiracy theory. Look, there's no conspiracy theory here. These officials are caught on tape saying they hate children and it's all about the money. So watch out for the next video. It's dropping probably on Wednesday of this week.
Well, we'll talk about that one then. We've been talking about these without you, but we're certainly grateful that we have you here. Let's go back to the phones and see if we can get a phone call or two. And Ken, let's see if we got you now. WGPH, go ahead.
Hello?
You are on. We can hear you.
Good afternoon. Thank you, Kerby. You always bring great stuff to the program. And thank and praise the Lord for James O'Keefe's undercover work to show the absolute misuse of the public's funds. And the comment, I know that here in Georgia, we have had a strong effort, particularly around Atlanta, Gwinnett County. I talked to a lady here a couple of years ago trying to get this repealed in the Georgia legislature. And just like what Mr. O'Keefe said, it's all about the money. But one thing that I find that nobody wants to talk about, and as I heard the undercovering of Common Core listening to Glenn Beck probably about 2 years ago, and I have relatives and friends who are school teachers in Georgia, and they say, well, about the time that we get one set of mandates, like No Child Left Behind, ironed out and in progress and going smoothly in our school system, kapow, we get a new Common Core, and now we're supposed to shift gears 180 degrees and go in a different directions. But I maintain that when we had the economic crisis in 2008, end of George Bush's year, then the beginning of Barack Obama's first term, that the way I understood the Common Core was that governors were going to have to lay people off, and part of the stimulus package was, if Mr. Governor, if you'll sign the dotted line, here comes billions of dollars to your state, but you have to promise to implement whatever we develop.
Yeah, carrot and stick. Yeah, and you had some states like Texas that said no, and a lot of other states said yes. And I think in this Thursday Republican-Democratic debate, especially in light of all things James O'Keefe has uncovered, let's ask Jeb Bush and maybe Chris Christie and a few of the other governors, why did you take Common Core? Why did you support Common Core? Do you still support Common Core? Don't you think that's a good question?
Exactly, and I believe they are complicit in it. I understand, the reason why the economic situation, but Barack Obama and his godless liberals now had the states and the state education departments over a barrel, and they were willy-nilly, nothing to do but comply. And now what you have is the money is flowing, the contracts are signed, and Mr. O'Keefe has uncovered it. I hope these videos are available to those in Georgia who are going to go to the legislature and say, hey, this is absolutely the wrong program for our children.
Yes. Well, again, those videos are available. We already have those 3 up there that people can find, and you have another one dropping on Wednesday, James. So comment about what Ken had to say.
So, I mean, you look at the transcript from the latest Common Core tape, the last one. She actually talks about the state of Texas. And she says she was, and then I'm going to quote her here. This is an undercover video. She says, quote, Common Core is really important because it needs to be some cohesion between the states. And Texas keeps screwing it up over and over again. And Texas wants to pound those dead white guys into the curriculum. It's almost, I mean, a hatred for America. And it's, I don't think we've ever been able to see such visceral anti-American venom. And as it relates to the presidential candidates, both Trump and Cruz have commented on these videos. Cruz commented about them in South Carolina. The problem with this issue is that it's going to be a grassroots-driven issue because the mainstream media is not, and I mean mainstream media, all corporate media is not going to want to touch this.
Yeah.
Because they don't want to be considered conspiracy theorists and so forth. And I tell them that, look, the difference is these guys have resigned now. And these executives at billion-dollar companies, Pearson's responding, everyone's responding. So I think it absolutely should be discussed in the presidential debate.
Well, I would think so. Well, we've talked about it, and I would sometimes expect that maybe you're not going to get a lot of coverage in ABC, NBC, CBS, CNN. We understand that. We've seen that even with the Center for Medical Progress. They haven't covered a lot of the Planned Parenthood videos. But why, when you say Fox News doesn't cover it and some of the others, you go, well, if nothing else, we're grateful at Point of View that everything's on the table, and this is certainly a topic that deserves some discussion. But I would think some of our listeners who are viewers of some of those other programs should say, why aren't you talking about this? Common Core is a very controversial issue nationwide, and these videos show, first of all, a tremendous amount of cohesion, as well as, now you say, corruption taking place. That's the kind of story that you would think most of the media would want to cover. And so you have a explanation that it's kind of the corporate mindset, but it's unfortunate that you have been doing this investigative work and you haven't been able to get the platform that you deserve.
Well, I say that if the media is not going to report the facts, then we will replace the media, because people are going to go where the stories are. And there's a quote from a couple different movies, one with Al Pacino, where he says, "The truer it gets, the worse it gets." That's from The Insider. And there's another quote from a movie about exposing the CIA and so forth. And the quote was, "This story is too true to tell." And sometimes, whether it's exposing the fact that we got offered Eric Holder's ballot, exposing...
I know that one just still makes me laugh. These
are publicly traded corporations, and they're not going to want to go to war with the Attorney General of the United States. Now, I'm a non-for-profit organization. I'm funded by thousands of people across the country who just care about the country. So I'm allowed to go places and to report things that many mainstream companies aren't. And that's not their fault. They just need access to these candidates. They need access to these people. And I'm willing to do whatever it takes to expose the truth. So I need your help in doing this. And if you want this message out and you want the presidential candidates to talk about it, go on Twitter, go on Facebook, get our YouTube video at projectveritas.com, and tweet at these people and say, hey, why aren't you covering this? Megyn Kelly, please ask Jeb Bush about this video, because this person got fired for saying how much she hates kids. I mean, this is something. This affects every child in the country.
Yes, it does.
These guys need to know about it.
Well, you have a place here at Point of View anytime you want, and I'm sad to hear that others have not given you the time of day. But as we said, nothing's off the table here on Point of View. And again, we'll look at those issues and we'll educate individuals. And I appreciate you being with us today here. And James, so we'll talk to you again soon.
Thank you, and stay tuned for the next one.
Looking forward to Wednesday. So, again, you heard it here. First of all, a third executive was terminated. That's Kim Korber. And that was the third video, by the way, from National Geographic. And just to, again, I'll give you a warning. Some of these people say some things I would never say in public or in private. And so, again, there's a few words that certainly we would not put on the air. And so you can check them out yourself. But also, we have now heard that there's another video. And I figured another shoe is about ready to drop. So we'll wait till Wednesday to find that out. When we come back, if you'd like to join us, perhaps some of the things we've already talked about, you'd like to join us this last half hour, an open line, 1-800-351-1212. We'll also talk about this upcoming Democratic presidential debate. All that coming up right after this.
When you're listening to or watching network news, do you ever start talking to the newsreader or anchor person? Come on, you can admit it, you do, don't you? You can't believe what you're hearing, and you feel the need to correct them. Sometimes you almost feel like you're living in a different world, and you are. People who deny God are living in a world of make-believe. The next time you're shaking your head at the news, I want you to do something. Pick up the phone or write a check or visit us online and give. Point of View brings you a biblically informed analysis of what's happening, but to do it, we need your partnership. Visit pointofview.net and click the link next to Donate Now where it says Become a Monthly Partner. Pointofview.net. Or mail your donation for this month to Point of View, Box 30, Dallas, Texas 75221. That's Box 30, Dallas 75221. Or call 800-347-5151. 800-347-5151. Don't just shake your head. Make a difference. Point of View will continue after this.
You are listening to Point of View. The opinions expressed on Point of View do not necessarily reflect the views of the management or staff of this station. And now, here again is Kerby Anderson.
Final half hour. If you'd like to join our conversation, 1-800-351-1212. Take some of the calls first on Common Core, since we just talked about that with James O'Keefe. And then we'll get into this Democratic presidential debate tonight, which is going to be much more intense than people would have predicted a few months ago. Wall Street Journal, for example, has written that taking Sanders seriously, the socialist Bernie Sanders beats Trump by 15 points in one recent survey. Of course, it's too early to say whether or not Donald Trump and Bernie Sanders will be the nominees, but it's certainly possible. And the reason is that Michael Mukasey, an individual that had served in George W. Bush's White House and also has been an advisor, by the way, to Jeb Bush, but served as U.S. District Judge and U.S. Attorney General, basically makes the case for a criminal charge against Hillary Clinton because the contents of these various documents now are increasingly sensitive. They obviously are indeed top secret. Just today revealed that some of this was cut and pasted, so it's very obvious now that this wasn't done by accident. You have to be pretty deliberate to have done some of the things that are actually being done. Sent then to her private server and then mirrored to the other server that was at the Clinton Foundation. So these are big issues. So we will talk about that. And whether Bernie Sanders brings them up, because you remember his famous comment, I don't care about the emails. He may have boxed himself in, but he can maybe say now, in light of all the new things we've learned, I guess I am concerned about it. Or he can simply say, I'm not going to talk about it, but still the people asking questions have to ask questions. It comes a point in time where if they don't, they've really engaged in journalistic malpractice. Also, some information coming out suggesting that some of the polling done in Iowa is really oversampling the individuals who actually will show up. So we'll get into some of that. But first of all, let's take some phone calls related to our conversation, the first part of this hour, and that is on Common Core. So we go to Aileen in Arizona, KNLB. Thank you for joining us today.
You're very welcome. My comment is I have a daughter that teaches teachers how to teach Common Core.
Wow.
And she is, the children are learning. She helps the teachers with the curriculum, and they are doing fantastic. And you know what? I was telling the lady that I talked to on the phone previously, it reminds me of the time when they had institutions to put people with mental problems. And what happened is, yes, there was a lot of corruption, and just like there is with Common Core, there's a lot of stuff with the government pushing, for wanting to know everything about the child, what he cares about, what he don't care about. Oh, yeah. There's a lot of stuff like that.
Not exactly 3 hours, is it? Yeah, go ahead.
Right, absolutely. But the truth of the matter is, the children are learning. They're learning how to think critically, and this is important. And we're so far behind in a lot of the countries. China's doing better.
We sure are.
Yeah. All the other countries are doing better. So we don't want to throw the baby out with the bathwater like we did with the institutions. Now we have people that are living in the street that can't live in a confined place. There's so many people that are. Look at the people that with the crime. People are that are really mentally ill are killing people, and it's like it's worse now than it's ever been, and that's what happened. They closed all the institutions. Now we have nowhere to put them, so now they're living on the streets.
Sure. And first of all, I would disagree with closing those institutions because we have people on the street that are dangerous to themselves or other individuals.
Right. Absolutely.
Now, nobody's closing the public schools down. I'll give you a little newsflash on that. There's not a snowflake's chance that public schools will ever close down. So that's a little different analogy.
That's not what. The thing of it is, it's throwing the baby out with the bathwater.
Well, I'll throw out Common Core and get back to the basic education. I think that works pretty well, and we've proven that that's worked in the past. But again, I appreciate your point of view, and I want to give a few more a chance to join us before we run out of time, and we'll head to Missouri, KNEO. Mike, thank you for joining us today. What would you like to add to the conversation?
Appreciate it. I've been a teacher and coach over, right at 40 years, and, I'm still going strong. But, I've seen a little bit of everything. But, it's just like the Founding Fathers. It wasn't an accident that they put 3 branches of government, because they knew people would mess up. Okay? And we need to have a system of checks and balances, really, with everything. If it's dealing with money, other nations or anybody, we've got to have somebody that can check on them.
Yeah, and I don't feel like there's been much of a check on the executive branch. You know, whether we talk about Common Core, or whether we talk about the EPA, or whether we talk about the IRS investigations and VA, which is the next video is coming out. Yeah, go ahead.
John Adams and all those guys knew that somebody will mess up sometime, and we got to have a system that will check that and correct it. Sometimes, it can be in-house corrected, maybe not. Maybe it has to be an impeachment. It has to be the other ways. Those things weren't put in there by accident because they knew people. They knew how people are. I still feel like people, no matter what their occupation is, people are like nations. They're going to try to do what's in their best interest first.
Yeah.
And then if I can take care of you later, that'll be good.
Yeah. Well, everybody's going to seek their own self-interest. That was kind of the argument of Adam Smith and the Wealth of Nations. But, we had the three branches of government should be a check on each other. And sometimes fourth branch of government, the media, and that is you had investigative reporters. We can refer to Watergate as a good example where the Washington Post pursued those stories. And now you just seem to have a lack of interest on the part of some of these investigative reporting agencies to go after some of these really good stories. So I applaud a James O'Keefe with the Project Veritas, or certainly some of the investigative pieces that have been done on Planned Parenthood by the Center for Medical Progress, or by Lila Rose, or some of the others. And so those are some key issues. And so we'll come back and see what this latest video that drops on Wednesday from Project Veritas on Common Core. Just before I take some more phone calls, though, let me pick up a couple of points, and one that I mentioned just a minute ago that deserves some attention. And again, where is the mainstream media on this? Okay, a few have talked about the Hillary Clinton emails, but now we know a lot more. And again, the comment that she has made is, I did not send classified information, and I did not receive any material that was marked or designated classified, which is the way you know that something is. First of all, that's not the case. A lot of people know exactly what is classified because if it mentions certain keywords, you know it's classified. Now, in light of the fact that some of this was cut and pasted, really do suggest that indeed this was done to prevent it from looking like it was. And so again, Michael Mukasey, who was the Attorney General under George W. Bush, has made a very compelling case indeed that a criminal charge against Hillary Clinton is justified, and that might actually change everything. Bernie Sanders, even today, as we have a run-up to the Democratic presidential debate, has actually desperate campaign that lacks excitement, and I suspect he's going to have a lot more to say about that. And it was interesting that some were even asking, for example, whether or not this would actually be hurtful to Clinton as she runs, because he's now been a much more formidable opponent. And, of course, he turned it around very quickly, I thought, in the discussion and said, well, just think about all the things she's saying that might hurt me, because he's convinced that he is going to be the nominee. And that so some of the things that the people in the, if you will, he called them the Clinton hitmen, are actually going to hurt his campaign. And yet, as I pointed out, if you take one of the surveys, Bernie Sanders, a self-avowed socialist, I'm not giving him a name that he doesn't give himself, actually in one of the polls actually could do better than Donald Trump. And that is really very, very interesting. So that may show up tonight as to whether or not he believes that he is the better candidate to run against Donald Trump. And, of course, that's assuming that Donald Trump is the nominee. But as I said before, if I had told you this time a year ago that I thought that the front runners would be Bernie Sanders and Donald Trump, you would think I had lost my mind. And even 6 months ago, when I kept saying on this program that I'm just not so sure Hillary Clinton will be the nominee, I just stopped saying it because people would just laugh when I would make that kind of statement. So we'll see where it plays itself out. But it's become a much more interesting political campaign than many so sure some of the polls out of Iowa are correct. We'll be right back.
Now, back to Point of View, your listener-supported source for truth.
After a few more minutes, we'll take another phone call on Common Core in just a minute, but let me at least get this in before we run out of time. And that is, when you see some of these polls, you have to recognize that it is difficult for pollsters to understand exactly who is going to show up for a primary, and it's even more difficult to figure out who's going to show up for a caucus. And this came out from Eric Erickson. By the way, he's got a book coming out next month. I'd love to get him on the program here, but he points out something that's very important, and that is people who show up for primaries may not know the caucus location, or they may not realize they have to stay an hour, or they may think they can show up late. That all affects the turnout. And if you want to understand what's going on in Iowa, I think what's happening right now is some of the polls by Fox and CNN are oversampling the individuals who will actually show up for a caucus. And this comes from Steve Deace. Steve Deace has been on our program before. He had a book out. He's actually doing a talk show on another network, and wish him well. But Steve Deace points out that if you look at both the two polls that many people cite showing that Donald Trump is running away from the rest of the field and has a double-digit lead, the Fox poll and the CNN poll, they all assume that about 300,000 people in Iowa are going to be voting in the Iowa caucus. And so as a result, that's why they argue that Donald Trump has a double-digit lead. But Steve Deace points out that that's about a 200% voter increase from the highest Iowa caucus turnout, which took place in 2008. Now, what was going on there? Well, you had a number of people running, and first of all, back then you had Huckabee win, and then, of course, Santorum won 4 years later. And, of course, you also had Barack Obama running against Hillary Clinton. And so this is a higher turnout than you had when you had Barack Obama and Hillary Clinton on one side, and you had, of course, John McCain and Mike Huckabee and everybody else on the Republican side. Now, the most voters they've had in Iowa in a primary, which has always had a higher turnout in Iowa, was 230,000. And again, these surveys are based on 300,000. So you can see that I think it is quite likely that this is oversampled. Okay, so you say, well, then which poll should I believe? Well, I go back to Eric Erickson, and he says that you might want to look for a poll by Ann Seltzer, because she had a very good track record in the past in both catching the trend line for Mike Huckabee in 2008 and Rick Santorum in 2012. And she's actually caught a similar trend line for Ted Cruz. So, again, you might pay attention to that particular survey, but just trying to help you be an educated viewer and listener, because some of these polls might not be weighted accurately, and that could mean a very significant difference next week when, of course, you have the Iowa caucus. Let's take some more phone calls. We'll head out to Missouri once again. This time, Scott, what would you like to say?
Hey, Kerby, thanks for taking the call. On this Common Core issue, I understand. I have 4 kids who have been in the public schools. I've dealt with Common Core from kindergarten all the way up through, at this point, 8th or 9th grade. And I think whereas, there may be a goal for kids to develop critical thinking, the biggest disadvantage I see to Common Core is two things. First, there is no emphasis on just pure learning of information. It's expected that kids, for instance, your math, your multiplication and division, simple multiplication and division issues. My wife actually had to constantly work to get our kids to learn these basic mathematical type things as well as English things, such as just vocabulary. And what I see happening with Common Core is that how do you develop critical thinking if you have no information in your head at all?
Right.
That's what I see as the problem with Common Core. It's not that it's... And another thing I've noticed is with, for instance, the math. One of my kids brought home a math problem that was basically an algebra problem, and this kid's in 4th grade. How in the world do you expect a kid in 4th grade to have the critical thinking to solve an algebra problem? I mean, that, to me, is the problem with Common Core.
I realized that tomorrow I do a daily commentary, and of course I record them a week ahead of time. I just realized that my commentary on Common Core comes out tomorrow, and a lot of it was based on the first 2 videos. Now, of course, we have a third one. One of the teachers in the video said, well, Common Core is just another fad. And I was thinking about that. We've had Goals 2000, we've had outcome-based education, we've had self-esteem education, we've had all sorts of new standards for math and history, we've had school to work, we've had No Child Left Behind, Race to the Top. You get the idea? I mean, it just seems like every few years we have another fad. I understand what one of our callers was saying. You don't want to throw the baby out with the bathwater. Well, the thing I don't want to throw out is what works, and what works in education and what worked through all of the 19th and early part of the 20th century were to recognize what's called the trivium. At the younger ages, you want kids to memorize. They're pretty good at memorizing at that point. Then you want them to develop ability to be able to synthesize and interact with those facts, and eventually they move into the rhetoric phase where they're able to communicate those. And it just seems to me, like you said, we're actually requiring them to do critical thinking without having some of the basics. And again, when you have young people that are saying, why should I learn the multiplication tables? I have a calculator. Why should I learn these facts? I have Google. You can see why, in some respects, both the technology and this latest educational fad are actually going in the wrong direction.
Yes, and I think I can point to the single source of all this, and that is the federal Department of Education, because I've also taught at the university level, and at that level, there's a lot of, obviously, grant proposals given out, grants given out for research, And in some respects, I think we saw that with the doctored research out in California on one issue, and I totally forgot what the issue was.
But I do remember that, yeah.
And the problem with these grants is that there's a specific goal, and there's the massaging of things to create to make that goal happen. And then, people who are looked at as being the smartest of the bunch make these recommendations, and then bureaucrats essentially say, "Okay, that's what we're going to do," not giving a chance for free sort of a debate on whether these goals even make any sense at whatever level they're going to be put on. So I think that really is the source of your problem is the
mandates,
the mandates coming
federal
out.
government.
Yes, and I think that is where you will find your biggest problem. Now, I agree that research and education should be done because there's always new things coming out as far as how people learn. I mean, there's always research saying, we didn't know that people learn that way. So. Nothing wrong with that type of research, but the mandating of it for every child in America is just foolish. I mean, you got kids in the more poor schools. I mean, if they can get a fundamental education of a classical fundamental education, they're way better off than figuring out how to do critical thinking because that's one step ahead for them. Well, why should the government mandate the same thing for them as they do, for a different? I think.
Gotta go. Unfortunately, I'm running out of time.
Sorry about it. Thanks for your time.
Yeah, well, I appreciate the comment. I wish I had more time, but we're out of time. And again, just to emphasize what Scott said, education in Detroit, Michigan is very different than education in Tupelo, Mississippi, very different in Stockton, California than it is in Augusta, Georgia. I mean, it's just different. I mean, and to have it mandated, a one-size-fits-all program around the country, that's a question. And, of course, this whole educational fad, and as one Colorado teacher called it, a money-making machine. Yeah, it's quite reasonable to look at some of those videos and say, maybe Common Core actually is rotten to the core. Let's take a break, and when we come back tomorrow, we'll have a chance to look at the Democratic presidential debate and have a chance to interact with you. Sorry we ran out of time before we ran out of comments, but there's always tomorrow. Want to thank Doug and Catherine for their help behind the scenes. Have a great day. We'll see you back here tomorrow.
Have you ever thought about taking a trip to the Holy Land? I know I have, but perhaps like me, you've always thought, there's no way I could ever afford it. And how would I get around, make sure I see everything? Well, maybe, just maybe, it's time to realize you can do it. Point of View has made the plans. 15 days, 10 in Israel, the possibility of 5 more on the journeys of Paul in Greece. And the cost? Well, it's pretty surprising. You can check it out at pointofview.net. Click on the Journey to Jerusalem banner. Imagine yourself in Caesarea and Nazareth, where Jesus grew up, in Capernaum, on the Sea of Galilee. We don't suggest you get out and try walking, but, well, you could. The Dead Sea, Masada, the Temple Mount, the Garden Tomb, it's all included, and you'll be accompanied by Kerby Anderson. And I don't even have time to talk about Greece. Athens, Corinth, Berea, Thessalonica, Philippi. See the full schedule at pointofview.net. Come on, take that next step. Pointofview.net. Journey to Jerusalem. Pointofview.net. Point of View is produced by Point of View Ministries.